ladies and gentlemen, for coming out this morning. I know in this time of coronavirus and unrest in the country and what's going on with the elections, your mind can be elsewhere. So it means a lot today that you guys took the time to come and prepare for your future. And for everybody watching this Zoom, I wish we could be in some convention room where we could be in the crowd and everybody network and socialize, but unfortunately, we're relegated to the Zoom. But that's not going to limit what you get out of this today. Today, we have a very, very special guest in A. Scott Bolden. He's one of the leading attorneys, period. I didn't say leading Black attorneys. I didn't say, leading attorneys of color. I said A. Scott Bolden is one of the leading attorneys in America, period. And we are so lucky to have him as a guest today. But before we get started, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Nicholas Ostis, and I'm from the hood. Northeast DC, if you're from DC, Trinidad, Northeast DC, Washington, DC. And I think it's important to let people know that because your circumstances of where you came from have nothing to do with the trajectory of where you're going in the future. So for every potential law student watching out there, know that where you came from has no bearing and no trajectory on where you're going in the future. You can't accomplish what you want to in life. And myself and Scott and others that are around today are testaments to that. But my name is Nicholas Austin, and I'm from Washington, D.C. Northeast. I grew up in D.C. my entire life and then went down south to Atlanta, Georgia to Morehouse College. The house, right?
That's
right.
And
so after 4 years at Morehouse, I then did 3 years at Georgetown Law back home in D.C. And so after law school, I joined the law firm of Foley and Lardner in Georgetown, D.C., and I stayed there for about 5.5 years practicing mergers and acquisitions and venture capital law. After that, I got an opportunity to be in-house counsel at Caterpillar. It's the world's largest industrial equipment manufacturer out in Illinois. So I did that for about 3 to 4 years. And then now I'm currently at Wells Fargo Bank, and you've probably seen us on the news lately, but I'm there fighting the good fight and doing mergers and acquisitions and venture capital as well. And so I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you because, as much as the work I do in mergers and acquisitions at Wells or whatever company that I happen to work for, none of it is as important as taking the time out to talk to the future, especially people that look like me, people that have had similar struggles as me, and people that, my advice can help them get where they want to go. And so with that said, today isn't about me. Today is about the man, the myth, and the legend, A. Scott Bolden. And it's hard, right? When you're pre-law, sometimes, you're talking to somebody that's important. They're talking to somebody that's just done a lot in the field and the space and for the culture, but you can't get the gravity of it, because you're just not in the profession. But I'm here to tell you that Scott is one of the critical central figures in our profession, not just among Black lawyers, but among lawyers, period. And it's such a treat to have him today as a guest. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about Scott, what he's done. A. Scott Bolden is the current managing partner in the Washington, D.C. office of Reed Smith. And for those of you that don't know what managing partner means, he runs the law firm's D.C. office. So you're talking about hundreds of lawyers and thousands of employees all looking to Scott every day for direction, guidance, and leadership. And statistically, I actually ran the numbers on this. It's actually harder to become an equity partner and managing partner at a top 100 law firm than making an NFL football team. So I want you to think about that, right? Because we talk about how hard it is to make, the NFL or the NBA or to become an athlete or a singer or an entertainer. But for African Americans, especially, and African American men, it's even harder to become a leader in a major law firm. So, what Scott has managed to do with his life is impressive. But what's even more impressive is that he takes the time to give back and do things like this. Scott is on the executive committee of the firm, but you may know him as a prominent trial lawyer in and around DC. He's a white-collar defense lawyer at companies. And so what that means basically is when companies like mine, like Wells Fargo, when we get in trouble and we have legal issues, we call Scott. We call Scott and we say, hey, can you help us navigate this? Can you help us organize or orchestrate our defense? and represent us, you know, in whatever matters we're dealing with. And Scott comes to the call. You know, he's done litigation of every kind in DC for about 30 years. And I wasn't going to tease him, but, you know, that's about my age. And so to put it in perspective, you know, Scott's been doing this as long as I've been alive.
Oh,
so,
my goodness gracious.
I mean, I got to give you a little bit, man. But you still look good, man, because you know what they say, black don't crack. So, so you still look good, buddy.
What an introduction.
But even though, you know, Scott spends a lot of time in the practice of law, what's really important to know is what Scott does to give back to the community. He's active all over DC in all kinds of youth enrichment programs, helping young lawyers of all ilk and creed, you know, giving back to organizations like the National Bar Association and, you know, helping with civil rights issues in the country. And so, you know, just as you see Scott in the courtroom or representing, you know, multinational conglomerates and companies, you also see Scott doing pro bono work and giving back to the community and doing things like this today. And so it's a real treat to have Scott here with us. And, you know, I'm not going to take any more time out of Scott because we really want to hear what he has to say. And so I'm going to turn it over to you to tell us a little bit about yourself and just a little bit about your journey to how you got where you are today, because I'm sure everyone out there watching is wondering, well, man, how do you become A. Scott Bolden? You know, how do I go from being someone who's not even admitted in law school yet, or maybe haven't even ever applied, to looking back and being the leader of one of the nation's most prominent law firms and managing an office there? You know, can you tell us a little bit about your journey, Scott?
Sure. Nick, thank you so very much, my Morehouse brother. And I want to thank Evangeline and her team and staff for hosting this incredible conference on an annual basis. I think a year or two ago, I was in person at the Harvard Law School presenting and on a panel with some great litigators who happened to be African American. You know, Nick, I think you said the most powerful thing in your presentation. I will accept the accolades, but I only accept them when they are presented the way you presented them, right? What did you say? You said, A. Scott Bolden is a great lawyer who essentially happens to be African American, not a great African American lawyer. And that is so vitally important because my race has nothing to do with my ability whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And so often I am put in that category, and so many other Black lawyers are put in that category when others speak of us about how great we are to be a Black lawyer. That's like when someone refers to me as a minority, I always interrupt them, Black or white, and say, I'm a minority to what? Because I'm not a minority to anyone or to anyone. I compete on the merits and the value of my ability and my preparation, and that's it. Race has nothing to do with it. So don't qualify me or disqualify me by adding race to my title or to my achievements. And I say it nicely and respectfully, but again, thank you for allowing me to be here. You know, I want to talk to, and everyone's a young person because I'm 58. So when I say young people, if you're under 58, no, I'm talking to you. Okay. I want to talk to you about this extraordinarily accidental life in big law I've had. You're going to hear from a lot of speakers over the course of the next couple of days, I think up to 120. And the reality is, if you're thinking about going to law school, you're thinking about being a lawyer, you should listen intently to all of my colleagues who are going to be presenting and then make the determination that I'm going to law school. But I must tell you, it is a most important question that you can ask yourself. So I'm going to talk about this journey of mine into big law, a space where I had zero interest because I never believed that big law was a friendly place for people of color. And then I'm going to talk to you and weave in race, racism, and the law and what it's meant to me. You're going to hear that term racism a lot because it is the unsolved challenge, not only in our profession, but in our country. And my goal in presenting to you as the future leaders of this country is to impart not only my story, but my struggle, my challenge, and my hopes when it comes to my profession and this country when it comes to racism and race and how the law matters, if you will. So you want to be a lawyer. That's pretty good. There are lots of lawyers. Why do you want to be a lawyer? Whenever young people call me and they're on my schedule, because I talk to and mentor young people a couple times a week, the question that befuddles them is like the question that befuddled Senator Kennedy. Why are you running for president? So when I ask young people, why do you want to be a lawyer? They often struggle with the answer. They want to be a social change agent. They want to help people. They want to argue in court or something that could be esoteric or something very simplistic. But none of the answers are satisfactory. Why do you want to be a lawyer? You want to be a lawyer because you're going to need a law degree to do whatever in the law you want to do. If you give me an answer about being a social change agent, you don't need a law degree or to be a lawyer to do that. If you want to argue in court, you really don't need a law degree to do that. You can certainly argue with your friends in other forums and what have you. But the most important question for you remains, why do I want to be a lawyer? That's not a 10-word response off the top of your head. To go to law school, to pass the bar, to work in a law firm, to work for yourself, to be a CEO of a company, what is the value differential in getting your law degree? I'm not going to answer that question because that question is really, really up to you. But know this, you are going to have to work your butts off to be an extraordinary lawyer. And if you're in it to be an ordinary lawyer, I suggest you don't choose this profession. If you want to make a difference, if you want to be a dynamic leader, if you want to be incredible during challenging times of COVID and racial consciousness and an economy that has been driven into the ground, you should want nothing more than to be an extraordinary lawyer. Secondly, it is a jealous lover of your time, money, and resources. It is a jealous lover. So you better love it. It will demand everything you have and demand more of what you don't have. I'll say that again. It is a jealous lover, the law game. It will demand everything you got and demand more of what you don't have to give it. Super important. If you can't answer those questions and be prepared to meet that challenge, you ought to think twice about going into the law. But if you want a challenge, if you want versatility, if you want to be a decision maker, if you want to be a rainmaker, if you want to be a difference maker, there is no better profession, no better versatile profession to be in than to practice law and to lead and to be a change agent in your community, to make a difference, to change laws, to legislate laws. It gives you that type of versatility. The question for me was pretty simple. I became a lawyer because my father was a lawyer. He was in Joliet, Illinois. He was a civil rights leader, one of the many lieutenants of Martin Luther King, who brought about change in Joliet and Will County and all over the state of Illinois. He was a civil rights lawyer. He was CP. He was a criminal defense lawyer. Grew up from the age of 7 or 8 watching him try cases all over the state. Unlike me, I try cases all over the country. I remember the most singular impact his practice of law or his cases had on me was a trip we took to Southern Illinois that is below the Mason-Dixon line. It was a murder case. His client was Black. The victim was white. And we were in Collinsville, Illinois. We were the only 2 people of color, Black people in the courtroom. We stayed with, quote, relatives. This was in the late 60s, early 70s, when Southern Illinois, which is below the Mason-Dixon line, really hadn't caught up and got smart on civil rights and human rights and the treatment of people of color. This was a controversial case. And so my father said we were staying with relatives who I had never met. He stumbled when I said, what side of the family? Even at 8 or 9 years old. He tried that case. He won that case. But I remember his presence in the courtroom. My father was my hero from then on. I didn't need heroes who were athletes or entertainers that I couldn't touch. I could touch my father. I talked to him every day. I asked him about the law. And to grow up with a civil rights leader and a lawyer is something super special. We were taught not to hate people that didn't look like us simply because of the color of their skin, because if we did, we'd get severely reprimanded by him and my mother, but also it was the wrong thing to do. We were no better than those people who we oppose if we treated them the same way. Put a pin in that thought, because I'm going to get back to that as we look to 2045, where this country, America, supposedly, according to all reports, is going to be a country of color, not just communities of color. Super important, and the root of so much fear and angst in this country right now, without a doubt. Next, let me just say this. I grew up wanting to be, as I said, like my father. And my father always told me that that was wrong, that I should want to be better than him because the opportunities for me would be much better. I never forgot that. And when I got my law degree from Howard Law School, he certainly whispered that in my ear. And he is still my best advisor at the ripe old age of 86 years old. At Providence High School, which was in rural New Lenox, Illinois, racism would rear its ugly head again. On a fairly regular basis, the students that I went to school with had no problem using the N-word, whether they were angry, mad, happy, or sad. I went through a series of fights and arguments, ignoring. I went through a series of making fun of it myself in order to matriculate at that school. There seemed to be no answer from Providence, St. Lenox, New Lenox, Illinois. It seemed the administrators, the teachers, the principals didn't really seem to have an answer to these anecdotal instances that drove me crazy, including my parents and others who supported me. But I never forgot that. It was a driving force that sent me to Morehouse College. Maybe that would be the answer as an HBCU. But still, racism reared its ugly head still outside of Atlanta. I remember being stopped by the police driving a friend's car, and they illegally searched the car, had me in handcuffs, and went through the car and found what we used to call, I don't know what they call it now, was marijuana roaches. You know, marijuana cigarettes that had been smoked and you couldn't smoke them anymore, found them in the ashtray. I didn't smoke marijuana at the time. They weren't mine. I certainly indicated that to the police officer. But in exchange for my freedom, on a dark, cold, lonely night outside of Atlanta in Gwinnett County, in exchange for my freedom, he made me eat those cigarette butts, right? He made me eat them to dehumanize me, but to treat me differently, and to say, I'm either taking you in or you eat these, as if he was teaching me some lesson. I ate those cigarette butts, those marijuana cigarette butts that night, and I never forgot how it tasted. And every time, every class I went to, every bar exam I took, I thought about that police officer in Gwinnett County. You know, I never had a problem with race or the race question in America, despite these early incidents of racism that impacted my life. Southern Illinois trial, the Providence High School calling, even the police officer. I never had a problem question or talking about it. I had a problem that others had a problem with the race issue in this country. So while Morehouse taught me about leadership and Howard Law taught me how to make money and to practice law, the race question in my life has continued to perpetuate itself, without a doubt. But Morehouse simply was not the answer. We have at least in regard to stopping racism, we have, as Black men and women, we all have these stories of being stopped by the police, being pulled over for driving a nice car. We've all had those stories. I've been dragged out of my home by the police when a burglar alarm went off and put down on the ground and asked for ID. I almost chuckled to tell the police, well, it's my house, it's in there, you wanna let me go get it? And he certainly didn't believe me. These instances have not shaped any anger in me. They've certainly shaped my resolve, though, as a lawyer, to do everything I can to eliminate racism from my space, my community, and my country. And being a lawyer helps me in a very special way do just that. As I went to the DA's office after Howard's Law School, I certainly ran into it even in the courtrooms of the New York State court buildings. At midnight, on 24-hour arraignment, I watched the defense attorney who had clients who had been arrested for robbing a group of people on the subway refer to his clients as tall, strapping young bucks. And he looked up at the client who was about 6'2", as if he was going to raise that gentleman's lips to show that he had good teeth. It was reminiscent of a slave trade almost. And while I protested and objected, I remember talking to my supervisor about the incident, and he just did not get it. He did not do anything about it. And the cases, day in and day out, simply went on. What was amazing about the criminal justice system to me as a young prosecutor was that 80 to 90% of the people that I was prosecuting looked like me. And that 80 to 90% of the people making prosecutorial decisions from a policy-making standpoint did not look like me. They were white, I was black. That inequity in of itself told me that so much more work had to be done. But what was even more frustrating about it at the DA's office and in other institutions is that those colleagues that don't look like us simply don't get it. We don't matter. If you look at the statistics that show what are the top 10 things on your mind on a daily basis, racism for Black people is 1, 2, or 3. If you ask someone white the same question, racism doesn't even enter the top 5, maybe the lower 5. It's simple. Racism doesn't matter. Race doesn't matter, because if you don't look like me, then you don't have to deal with it on a daily basis, real or perceived. Traveling through New York and spending 4 or 5 years as a prosecutor, I kept my head down and tried 50 felony trials because I did not want racism or these issues to negatively impact my ability as a lawyer. I had to get trained to be effective to fight that, without a doubt. I would later move after 4 or 5 years to Washington. I was unemployed for 6 months, having tried 50 cases. There was a hiring freeze in the government. I had a job with DOJ that never came about. But in those 6 months, very few people know that whether I was trying to figure it out or not, it was in my first marriage. My wife was working, and I was watching the Flintstones and Bewitched, trying to figure out what I was going to do. For her, it was pretty simple. You got a law degree, you've tried 50 cases, go find a job, brother. Go do your thing. And so I did, but it was hard. And so for 6 months, I literally bust tables at the Marriott on Pooks Hill Run Road in Bethesda, Maryland. Some of you from DC know where that is. I washed cars in Rockville, Maryland with a law degree and having tried 50 cases. I dumbed down my resume because I figured to stay married, I needed to bring in some level of money. And since there weren't many legal jobs at the time, I do this, right? It was the best and worst times for me. One, I wasn't really good at it. And secondly, my rights were violated as a blue collar worker more than anything. It motivated me to go get a legal job. But it was amazing to look through life at that prism at a base level wages and to really see my employment rights being trampled upon, not because I was Black, but because I was a baseline frontline worker, either at the car wash or at the hotel. These experiences certainly helped shape me and my drive into big law. And then the call came from Weldon Latham through a friend who was a very well-known, prominent senior Black partner in Washington, D.C., who invited me to interview for Reed Smith, a regional law firm at the time, about 400 lawyers. Now we are 1,800 lawyers in 33 cities worldwide. Why would I take this position? I never thought much about big law. I flunked contracts at Howard Law School. My fault, my responsibility. I amjured it, or I got the highest score in the class the second time I took it because I was more focused, if you will. But why would I do this? I didn't think people of color were treated well at big law firms then, and not now. It's better, but then I just had no appetite for it whatsoever. Why would I do it? But it freed me. It freed me to do pro bono and civil rights work. It freed me to lecture and to teach. It freed me to write a book. It freed me to work with and against some of the best lawyers in the country. And it allowed me the freedom to help my community and those in my community because I needed to, I wanted to, and that it was the right thing to do. I took that job. I interviewed and was hired. A year later, Weldon Latham would leave, and I was not going with him. Essentially, I was left as the only black lawyer in the DC office. There weren't many black lawyers at Reed Smith then, but I wasn't in charge. I was not going to be the HNIC under any circumstances. But he had trained me one thing, that this was a business, this was a partnership, and that generating business for this law firm was what made this law firm work. He trained me to develop clients. I had 50 years of experience under my belt, and I was primed to compete with those who would be my competitors, associates and other partners, if you will. And of course, there were challenges. I always felt there was a perception that I wasn't competent, that I was competing against people from Harvard and Yale and Princeton, if you will. But I certainly rejected being marginalized. I rejected being less than anyone. And the most important thing you can do as a lawyer in a law firm or in a company or whatever your profession is to let others define you and your ability. Why would you delegate that power to them? You should never do it. I never did. If someone's got an opinion about your skill set, your writing, your speaking, hell, even the presentation I'm making right now, why would I delegate that power to define how I feel about myself or whether my worth is either to the firm or to others? I define that, right? I've got to keep that close within, because if I let others define it, then I submit to being marginalized. I submit to being less, and I submit to being perceived as somehow less adequate or less or not as good as my competitors. I could never let myself do that. You've got to have a love supreme of self. It starts with not just your faith in God, it starts with your faith in yourself, right? You've got to have a love supreme. If you've got a supreme love of self, no one can marginalize you. No one can define whether you're good, bad, or otherwise. You define that, and you strongly share that with others, because that is the message, and that is what makes you you. If you ever lose that edge, if you ever start to second guess yourself, and law firms will make you do that, then you've lost that battle. You haven't lost the war, but you've lost that battle. And so what did I do? I started developing business. I had a skill set already through political fundraising, my pro bono work. I began representing politicians, athletes, and entertainers on a pro bono basis. For me, name recognition was everything. And if it was a case that was going to be covered in the press, it was to have some notoriety, I would volunteer for it. Because I knew on litigator, I was seasoned, I was well prepared. That was important because that helped me eventually turn those clients into paying clients. And it built my name recognition. If I was going to be the greatest litigator of all time, what difference would it make if nobody knew my name? And so I worked hard to build my name recognition. I made partner in 4 years. I certainly grew that practice into the millions of dollars. And over 30 years, it generated tens of millions of dollars for the firm, and been celebrated as a lawyer and celebrated for winning really tough cases, not only at the local level and the state level. I've led the DC Chamber of Commerce, the DC Democratic Party. I even ran for office and lost. The voters wanted me to go back to practicing law. I told you that the law was a jealous lover. Along the way, I got divorced, and I found my daughter of 19 years that I never knew existed. Both of those incidents changed my life. Along the way, I had twin daughters and a granddaughter, And it made me not only a better man, but a better lawyer, a better human being, and more caring, not just about money and success, but about family and community. And so where are we now, ladies and gentlemen? I'm on my second round of being managing partner of the DC office of Reed Smith. There are a lot more lawyers of color at Reed Smith than ever before. I'm a former member of the executive committee worldwide. I'm still generating business, still representing business leaders, athletes, and entertainers. So where do we go from here? I'm on another mission, and I hope you'll share that mission with me. My mission is ending systemic and generational racism in our profession and in America. When you see me on Fox or CNN or MSNBC or any media outlet, you can see me talking about this race issue that has followed me throughout my career, a demon, a ghost of my life that will not stop appearing in my life and probably in yours. In 2045, America will be a country of color, not just communities of color. It is a great deal of fear and hatred in the white community for that date and that year, at least I think so. Many of you all will think that George Floyd triggered this higher level of racial consciousness and higher level pushback from people who disagree and people that don't look like us. I submit to you that that's not the case. That element of America has always been present. It just got brought mainstream by the current leadership. George Floyd triggered major protests worldwide, not just here. And they were black and white protesters that satisfied me that it was not their America either, and that they were willing to lock arms with people of color and say black people deserve better, and that if you don't treat black people better, then this is not my America. This is not the America I want, and so I'm going to get on the front line. I want the police to see me as human, not inhuman or less than human. I want them to be treated the same way. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in two worlds, one black, one white. We always have. And while we sought integration and we are integrated at some levels, Sunday is still the most segregated day of the week. These two worlds mean that we may not or do not matter to one another. The reason the statistics show that race and racism in the law, or rather race and racism are not a priority of people that don't look like us, is because they don't really have a deal with it. We're not relevant to them, right? We got to be relevant to each other. And so we've got to come together and lock arms and have some powerful, courageous dialogues on this, rooted in tolerance, forgiveness, understanding, accountability, hope, and strategies and action for ending racism. We've got to understand one another. We've got to reshape how we think about one another, and we've got to be connected to one another. I don't want my white colleagues to just be anti-racist. Most will say that they are. I want them to be anti-racism. I want them to stand up and every day do something to end racism in this country. I want both sides to stop hating one another if that's the truth, but more importantly, I want both sides to understand and be sensitive to who they are and what they represent to each of us. I want our colleagues to do something about race. You, black, white, yellow, or brown, can certainly do something about it as social engineers. We need to lock arms and move forward together, right? Without any anger, because America, while it may be bending, it's not going to break when it becomes a country of color. You are the future, for sure. Ending racism is up to you and each of us. We're not born with a racism gene. We're taught racism. We're taught to tolerate it. We're taught to fight it. But those that don't look like us, be it environmental or from their parents or family, they're taught it. What other reason could it be for generational and systemic racism? We got to stop teaching our kids to hate, and we've got to stop hating one another. So my next challenge and the rest of my life is ending racism. It's up to me. It's up to you. It's up to each of us. Won't you join me? Won't you join me in this new journey of mine of once and for all ending racism in this country as well as the legal profession? Thank you.
Wow, wow, phenomenal, phenomenal. It reminds me of when I was a young lawyer, and you probably don't even remember, but I had gotten your number from a friend because everybody said if you went to Morehouse and you want to be a lawyer and you're in the DC area, you got to talk to Scott. And so, wow, this was maybe about 12 years ago now,
Mhm.
and I got your number. You didn't even know who I was, and
Cold called me.
cold called you. I was just like, the hell with it. I'm just gonna roll the dice and see what happens. And you had a really busy schedule, and so we ended up talking 2 months later because you got me on your schedule. I talked to your assistant, and that conversation, helped change my life. It
Thank you, Nick.
inspired me to go for a job in big law. It inspired me to stay in big law for half a decade, and the lessons and training that I got was bar none, and I wouldn't be where I am in my career today. And so that's a personal thank you from me to
Thank you.
you. And you didn't even have to know me to do that. And so for the people who are watching this, if you have your dreams and you have your goals, it's important to not be scared to reach out to individuals or to ask or to go for what you want to go, because at the end of the day, all someone can tell you is no. And so, always shoot your shot, as the kids would say. And so that's a personal thank you from me to you. But, what I want to do right now
And by
is
the
I'm
way,
looking.
use that no, if I may, Nick, use that no to motivate yourself. Don't get depressed about no. Get pumped up about no. One of the leading Black partners who happen to be Black, when I first came to Washington, told me that there was nothing in my resume or bio that would support me being at a big firm. He didn't know me. He couldn't do anything to help me and wouldn't. And I probably need to go back to the government. I was so disappointed and so sad after that call, after that conversation, because so many people around him had pumped me up. And I never let them know what that partner said to me, but I used it in my interviews with Reed Smith and other big law firms. I used it. I never forgot those words. And you know what? He did me the biggest favor ever because he motivated me.
Yeah, that's great advice. To use the nose to fuel
Mm-hmm.
you.
That's right.
Because it's almost like that Michael Jordan documentary. It's one of those
Yeah.
things where when people underestimate you or undervalue you, you got to channel that energy, and clearly you've done that. But what I want to do is I want to turn to the chat, and so it's everyone who's currently watching the Zoom. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little chat bubble. And you're going to click on it, and I'm going to say hi in the chat for those that are there so that you see me. And I'm going to ask you to ask Scott some questions, because we've got a great guy here today that's done so much for the community and has so much knowledge and wisdom to share. I wish this were longer. I wish we could do this all day, but we don't have that kind of time. But I'm looking at the chat now, and actually I see a question that was asked earlier. It looks like from a Miss Pamela Onoiwu. She asks, for you, Scott, how do you get your big law clients to fix their compliance issues, especially when it comes to race and education law? And so did you have anything for Pamela on that, Scott?
So I do. So the reality is big law is going through a transformation whereby the racial reconciliation or racial reckoning, racial equality, each of them have these programs. For Reed Smith, we have the REAP program, which is Racial Equity, maybe Action Panel. I can't remember, I just butchered it. But it has 3 components to it. Other big law firms have them too, and it's about action. So it's about, we pick issues that deal with race, that we're gonna have courageous conversations internally, which we're doing on an ongoing basis. We then are going to take our action plan. I'm sorry, that's what the AP is, the action plan, Racial Equity Action Plan. We then are going to take, after those courageous conversations, we're going to partner with community groups that are making a difference in voter suppression, in police reform, in criminal justice reform, and who are fighting race and racism. And then thirdly, which is a great answer to your question, is we are reaching out to our top clients, all clients really, and partnering, sharing our REAP program with them and partnering with them to make their workplace better in regard to the treatment Black people and the people of color, but also in sharing with them what we're doing internally, partnering with them, not only to make their workplace better, right? But then also doing joint projects with them in the community to not only sensitize, but to make a difference. And if you've got clients out here who aren't interested in that or just want to pay lip service to it, that's not really a good client. Not under these circumstances. They may be a good client because they pay well, but we've also got to push our clients to be better in this regard. That's what Reed Smith is doing.
Oh no, that's excellent, and we're lucky to have Reed Smith on that, and we're lucky to have you leading that initiative. We got another question here, and this time our question is from Miss Whitney Watson. She wants to know, Scott, what advice do you have for African American women that are interested in big law?
The same advice and counsel I would give and gave in my presentation. At first blush, at the base level of my advice would be the same, right? Now we're going to bifurcate. Now, because Black women, African American women, are not only the backbone of our community, not just because they outvote us, Black men, we got to fix that, but because they have been the backbone and the base of the African American family, the base or the bedrock of Black men and our success in this country and of the family. And so you all face a different challenge or an additional challenge vis-a-vis being a woman and Black. And so the perceptions of your white counterparts come into play, and combating that and addressing that, but combating it as you climb that corporate ladder within a big law firm is going to be really important. One, I think it's important you have mentors that look and sound like you. They don't have to, but they have mentorship. Secondly, do not be marginalized or perceived in a negative manner because you may have a strong response to an issue or to a person. Do not let them perceive you as the angry Black woman. Just like with men, we have to, in corporate America, we have to be very careful how we're perceived wrongfully as the angry Black man. There's more than one way to skin that cat. So not only mentorship, but how we interact with our partners, how we can be aggressive in big law vis-a-vis, okay, they're going to play golf, I'm gonna play golf. And whether you invite yourself or work your way into that golfing group, being a pretty good golfer, if you will. That's not just matriculating at a big law firm by example. That's not only putting you in a position to go after clients and to chase clients, because golf and other social activities or sports activities is a great way to get to know a client, and clients do business with people that they know. Those are just a few thoughts I have. I've got 30 to 40% African-American diversity in the DC office of Reed Smith. I've got some incredible African-American lawyers or lawyers who happen to be African-American women who enjoy mentoring, not just me, because they keep me in check, but they also enjoy mentoring young women. Majority of them, they mentor African-American young women, and I'll be more than happy to connect you to them because they could probably do a better job at answering this question than I could. I did my best.
Well, on that same note, we've got another question from Zakia West, and she wants to know, what would you like the pre-law students today? Because, remember, these are folks that are considering law school. They may apply or they haven't applied. I'm not sure yet, but they're pre-law students. What's the biggest takeaway, Scott, that you want them to leave today with?
That to be a lawyer, choose to be an extraordinary lawyer. Talk with me and others about what it means to be an extraordinary lawyer or a lawyer's lawyer. That is, you're well prepared, you get excellent results, you're a leader in your community. There is, I talk about taking parts of my presentation, and there are 120 other speakers, taking parts of that and putting those pieces together to chart your own course, and then have a supreme love of self, have no doubt about your ability, be fearless and courageous in going after your goals and objectives, despite what people may say. If you're charting your own course, there won't be many people that agree with what you're doing. But be fearless about it and have a supreme love of self. That equals success, in my opinion. It has for me. And be not dismayed. Be not dismayed by failure. Be not dismayed by failure. In fact, turn it around into a success. In my life, after every failure has come success, and after every success has come failure. I don't know about yours. Think about your life and tell me if that's true. God has a plan for you, but he's not going to show you that plan until he's ready. And you got to go down before you come up. My success as a lawyer came after working, bussing tables and washing cars. My success at the law firm came after losing a citywide election. My success in law school came after failing contracts. And I'm fearless talking about my failures. Whenever I get an award, Nick, I start talking about my failures before my successes when I present. And
why is that? Why is that, Scott?
Because I've learned so much more from failure than from succeeding. That your failures make you. Your haters make you. We didn't get into talking about haters. That's a whole nother presentation.
Whole nother presentation.
Right. But they make you. And so be not dismayed with failure. Do something with it. Because I'm spiritually based. I believe he's preparing you for something. Or that's not part of his plan. So you got to figure out what part of his plan is. Or figure out what your joint plan is with him. Take your pick, right? Because the plan is going to be for your success. It comes with preparation and talent. You got to combine the both. If you're just talented, but you don't prepare, you are a failure. I'm sorry. You may win, but you are a failure. If you prepare but have no talent, you're probably not going to win. And in this game of law, it's all about winning, depending on what you're doing in the law game.
No, that's excellent feedback, and I've taken some of that myself. Ladies and gentlemen, we are running low on time, but I'm going to try to get through just a couple more questions really quickly here. We got another one from Jacqueline Cobina Bolden, and she wants to know, what 3 books, and, name 3 or whatever books you think you should name that have helped you maintain your intellectual prowess and excellence.
There's a book called Power, The Elements of Power.
The Elements of Power, okay.
The Elements of Power. It's got an orange and blue cover. I recommend that for anyone in any profession whatsoever. Secondly, I recommend Machiavellian. And I am not promoting a Machiavellian view of the world and leadership. There are parts of it I accept, parts that I don't. But knowing Machiavellian and the principles of Machiavellian and how power works, power works with those who are close to you and those who are against you. Life is about strategy, right? And I'm a big proponent of reading about power strategies as well as Machiavellian strategies. And then the other book that I'm a big fan of is Souls of Black Folk. Ought to be fundamental reading. There are a lot of other readings, but Souls of Black Folk taught me a lot. As well as for guys, Black Boy by Richard Wright was always a staple in my life. And so, of course, you got to read the Bible. But those are the books that kind of, my view of the world and a lot out of.
All right. Well, Tammy, I'll ask you really quickly because I'm noticing there are awesome questions coming in. But unfortunately, we've only got about a minute or so left. And so what I'll do is for everyone who's asked a question today, Tammy, can you put Scott's information in the chat and whatever contact information he wants to give if people want to reach out, and I'll put my information in the chat as well. And so if you didn't get to ask a question today, don't fret, don't fear, use that email address. As I always like to say, the money's in the follow-up, because you can always meet someone like Scott. But if you don't follow up or you don't ask your questions later or find a way to get them answered, then that's on you. But I'll leave my information in the chat. And Tammy, if you could put Scott's information in the chat, that'd be great. And I'll ask you, Scott, to leave us with some parting words and parting wisdom that you want everyone to have as we close this program out today.
Well, all of you all are in a unique position. you know, your COVID kids. And I don't mean that in a negative way. You're young people who are coming up in COVID, which is an extraordinary period of time for us. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to be extraordinary? Or are you just going to be ordinary and let the new normal define itself? Are you going to define the new normal, right? Because remember, the action part of everything I presented is it takes action. And we're going to need all of us. You know, wearing masks and social distancing isn't about protecting yourself. It's about protecting others, if you will. And so this ought to be a time of action. And I hope whatever you're doing, whatever profession you choose, especially if you choose the law and you're an undergrad right now, I want you to take some action about COVID to make this a better place. And I want you to do something to fight racism every day of your life, because it is the most perpetuating problem we have, not just in this country, but in this world. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. Really enjoyed it, folks.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thanks, everyone. I wish we could do this again. And to Evangeline, we've got to do this again because clearly the demand is here for it. Scott, thanks always for taking your time
always,
and all the
brother.
great work you do. Everyone always. Be safe. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.